Lincoln stepped through the front door of the McBride's household shortly after bidding goodbye to his mother. He didn't utter a word to Lynn before the van sputtered down the road. Not that she blamed him. The athlete could feel the aurora simmering hostility surrounding the younger boy, and opted to avoid speaking with him. After all, what more could she say? Lynn has officially admitted the girl is the oversight of their producers, and the fact that they purposely left their brother out as icing of the cake of idiocy. While it may have not gotten that far, Lynn still witnessed her brother flying into a rant. If she ever so much as spoke a single word to him, it was easy for Rita to notice the tension, as a storm of questions began right after Lincoln exited out of the car. No sooner he shut the door, a voice called out from the living room. "Dad, is that you?" "No, it's just me," Lincoln answered, his voice sounding a tad agitated than he would have liked. Walking around the corner, he spotted Clyde sitting upside down on the couch with a handed game in his palms. He raised a brow. Clyde took notice of how quiet it felt. Glancing towards the kitchen and hallway to the bedrooms, where Mr. and Mr. Bride. "My dad's went power walking around the park, you know," Clyde spoke as he sat up. "Their usual weekend workout. I was going to join them, but you were with Dr. Lopez, and I need someone to keep the door open." Lincoln gave a light nod. "Thanks." The boy strolled over before flopping on the couch, giving a heavy sigh as he sank into his seat. The nerdy child gave a light frown. "Did you get anything from Lynn?" The Lao nodded, but didn't say anything. Though. Biting his cheek. "So, he set the game down on the arm of the couch. Was it bad, or... You never get those times when you feel like it was better if you didn't know something?" Lincoln asked out of the blue. "Well, if it were that one time I thought my nanny was feeling sick since she was making weird noises and..." Clyde's train of thought stopped from there as he shuddered heavily. "Let's just say I had to see Dr. Lopez every single day for nearly 3 whole weeks. Lynn finally told me about the sister fight protocol and why it came up so suddenly." Lincoln's frown deepened a little, "and why I wasn't told about it." "It was that way to settle their disagreements, right?" "Yeah, but they formulated that during the time when with the Airbnb that one weekend, and the thing is, though, is they didn't forget to include me in it. Lynn said they only just wanted me to get caught up with their stupid fights." "Okay," Clyde shrugged. "So what's so bad about that?" "The bad part is," Lincoln furrowed his brows a bit as he folded his arms. "The bad part is that they didn't even try to not get me involved. They blocked off the kitchen and bathroom for half the darn day. They wouldn't let me watch TV, which is kind of understandable. They took my bed sheets when we had spares. When they used my room as a space spot 3 times. He raised his few fingers to express the point. "I mean, we have 3 other rooms before you can even reach mine, so why did it always have to be my room? I mean, there's the attic and the basement, too." His left eye started to twitch a little. "And the dumbest thing about all this is that Lenny and Lori were always having a stupid fit over wearing the same dress. They could share the room, but not the same dress?" He turned his glare towards Clyde, who flinched a little. The lad was living up to his maiden name the more he talked. "Me and you wore the same shirt on picture day, and nothing was wrong with it. And since I'm talking about it now, there's one important fact that I remember. When Lynn first told me about a month ago, Lenny was wearing it first, so why does Lori feel that she should be the only one to wear it?" The room was dead silent, aside from the fading echo of Lincoln's yelling. Clyde blinked a few in surprise, due to being caught off guard by the sudden rant, with the Loud himself in a bit of shock at his own outburst. "Sounds like Lynn really pushed your buttons, huh?" Clyde spoke uneasily. Lincoln shifted his gaze down the sofa, before staring back into space. "It's not Lynn, it's just..." He put his hands on his face, slightly pulling down the eyelids with a sigh of frustration escaped him. "Now that I know why the protocol started, I didn't even know what to think anymore." Clyde pierced his lips. Did you ask her about the beating?" "She said that they were too angry to think straight." Lincoln then spoke softly, is feeling a bit wetter than normal. Everyone just kept arguing back and forth, and I just had to open my mouth at the wrong time and couldn't slip without being noticed. He raised his left arm, twisting a little, noticing how weird it felt, before saying to his side, I guess they aren't really trying to kill me after all. So does that mean you'll eventually talk to them again? Can you please ask for Luan next? She's got a lot on her plate, and that she wants to get off her chest. I'm pretty sure you can imagine what it is. Those words played in Lincoln's mind just before the session ended. She asked me if I could speak to Luan next, and I kinda promised her that I would. But are you going to? Lincoln lightly banged his heels on the face of the couch. Haven't decided yet. Well, when you do, you may want to think about letting some of that anger go before, or, Clyde paused, unsure of avidly for his advice. You could just tell your sister how you really feel, and as this does involve them. Lincoln flinched visibly, biting his lip while gripping his shoulders for support. I can't do that. Clyde raised a brow. How come? Lincoln sat deadpanned and stared at his friend, as if the answer couldn't be more obvious. 'Cause it's what got me sent to the hospital the first time I gave him a piece of my mind. The African-American sat a wary look in return. But you can just say that they weren't in the right state of mind at the time when they hurt you. Yeah, but that means they'll be perfectly fine and ready to literally turn me into a human pretzel if I opened up and say anything mean to them. I can't go through that again. The Loud held his left arm protectively, bringing his knees up to his chest. I just got my arm back, and what if they break it again, or take my other arm, or my leg? Lincoln gently rubbed his throat. His breathing started to become uneven. Or my head! The boy heard the sound of paper unfluttering down before a brown paper bag was presented before him. He gently took it from Clyde before placing it over his mouth and started his breathing exercises. Clyde patted him on his back while the Loud calmed himself down. I think you're just really confused at what Lynn said, or haven't figured anything out yet. First, I think they don't want your head. Now you're just thinking they do. And I think you really ought to tell them how you feel, buddy. Like Dr. Lopez once told me, it's better not to let your anger take control, because then you'll hurt yourself and those around you. Lincoln removed the bag from his mouth. What did you get angry about? Clyde smiled nervously. It was something related to Bobby and Lori. An unsurprised look gave Lincoln a quick response of spoke volumes. What? I can't help that Lori is so amazing, he said in a heavenly tone. She is so one of the sisters that also beat me up pretty badly, Lincoln monotonously reminded him. Also, I do really think you shouldn't be hard on Bobby. Have you ever hung out with him? No, Clyde stated quickly, folding his arms. Why would someone like me hang out with their enemy? That's my point, Clyde. Bobby thinks you're a cool guy, but it'd break his heart if he knew you didn't think the same about him. I don't think I remember the time you were being rude to him when you dressed as a waiter at John's. Well, he did have it coming though, right? The African-American gave his friend a quizzical glance. Lincoln returned the gesture with an annoyed look. No, he didn't. And you did blow our cover when we were trying to leave when those guys showed up. Okay, I may have been blown our cover, but you... He put his finger on Lincoln's nose. Would have talked it out with Ronnie Ann if I hadn't. The Loud formed a glare almost immediately. Hey, don't bring her into this! He spoke heatedly as he swatted his friend's hand away. It's true enough, though, Clyde spoke unevenly, unfazed by the Loud's irritation. She would have been mad at you, along with your sister and probably Bobby. Plus, we both know you enjoyed kissing her. Lincoln opened his mouth right as an accusatory finger pointed at Clyde, but the words died in his throat, leaving only a startled sound to come out. After a moment, a few words sputtered out as he tried to form a broken retort. Each time he spoke, Lincoln had to pause to recollect himself. But how does that even... Clyde smirked in triumph as Lincoln curled his hands into a fist, while shutting his eyes, barely suppressing a growl that he knew Clyde had a point. At least something good came out of that. But my point still stands. Lincoln blurted out, pausing to take a moment to simmer down. Breathing in deep breath through his nose. Look, thanks for preventing me from making a fool out of myself and having everyone hate me. But Clyde, he placed a hand on the other boy's shoulder. You're pretty much the brother I've never had. But Bobby's like the older brother I've always wanted. But I thought I was the brother you always wanted, Clyde whined, his voice breaking a little. Clyde, I said older brother, Lincoln stated, removing his hand and leaning a bit against the head of the seats. You'll always be my twin brother, in a way, but I'll never actually have an older brother to look up to since I've already have 5 older sisters, and I doubt I'll get a little brother since Lily was the last one to come part of our family. So Bobby is the closest thing I have to that. Clyde then nodded in understanding. However, he couldn't help the twinge of jealousy running through his core. Call it childish, a pair of siblings vying for their parents' attention, but he still had his doubts about Bobby. In particular, there was one lack of contact as far as Clyde was aware. Okay, but when was the last time you talked to him? Lincoln gave a curt frown. He wasn't going to argue about this any further, as it already dragged on longer than his patience would allow. I haven't seen him since I got out of the hospital, because we were so busy dealing with my sisters, he reminded him. And just do me a solid and try to be friendly towards him, please. It isn't like he hurt you in any way. Without another word, he got up from his seat, and Lincoln stopped short of the kitchen and turned around. And dating Lori doesn't count? Clyde had his mouth open to state the fact before clamping it shut. Lincoln beamed him to the punch, as his friend disappeared around the corner to grab a snack from the fridge. Clyde let his thoughts drift to Lori and her involvement with Lincoln's problem. As sweet and beautiful self actually scratched the former, Lori might have actually been beautiful, but she still punched Lincoln in lights out and made him feel afraid of her. Damn much he won't deny that. In fact, Clyde had realized that he had fallen over as Lori as much as the day he had heard Lincoln was in the clinic. He assumed that it was a sudden talk about Bobby. That was what it was brought up. The more he thought about it, the more he started to realize that Lincoln may have been right. Bobby hadn't physically ever attacked Clyde or belittled him, but he possibly was even obvious to the rivalry. The 11-year-old started with him for Lori's affection. Heck, Bobby called him Clydesdale on more than one occasion. And as far as Clyde knew, you can only give nicknames to people you like. Just ask them either or Lincoln the numerous code names that they give to each other over the radio. Adding to that is never a fact of anything bad about to happen to the San Diego, no matter how hard he tried to dig it up. It was becoming increasingly clear that Bobby was just really a nice guy who could have been a little bit obvious to his surroundings. The nerdy child sulked in his seat. Wow, I've been a real stinker, huh? Clyde flinched as the soda can suddenly obstructed his vision. Yeah, but it's not too late to talk him out, at least. Lincoln started as he waited for Clyde to accept the drink. He held the can in his other hand. I guess so. He grabbed the can, taking a moment to pop the pin. Thanks, but don't forget what I said about holding your emotions in. One day you might explode like a volcano if you hold it in, or a supernova. And the boy took a sip. You do owe me that if I talk to Bobby. He then grabbed the remote and flipped on the TV, which revealed a rerun of the Ace Savvy series. Lincoln sat down next to him, popping his can open. I'll try not to be that, but it'll be easy. I know Luan, like I hope I do. She might give me a bunch of puns to throw at me before giving me a literal punchline. Lynn Sr. had his eyes squinted on the laptop screen right in front of him, his fingers slowly rotating the scroll key as he weighed the options of the website he was viewing. Rita came out of the master bedroom with her purse holding her shoulder, acknowledging her glooming daughter, sitting on the armchair with a book in her hands, before rounding the corner. Honey, The mother paused as she noticed the husband's focus on trance, moving forward towards his back. What you looking at? First thing he noticed was that the logo on the map, which was PetSmart. Second was a list of pets on the screen was their prices, or more especially, all the fact that they were all reptiles. Water monitors? Rita let out loud as she eyed the search bar. Shh! the partridge hissed as he clamped a hand over her mouth. He looked around to make sure none of the kids were within earshot. Can't risk any of the kids spying what I'm doing. Rita leaned onto the table and placed a hand on her hip. And just what exactly you're up to? She looked at the screen and again. Is this about Lana? The balding man nodded. Oh, I just felt terrible after she realized one of her most pets were gone for good, especially El Diablo, even though he terrified me. Rita raised a brow. She's doing better now, though, is she? We've seen her spend more time with Lola lately. She has, but I still get that weird thing that she doesn't like me. She hardly talks to me or look at me unless she needs something. Last night when I heard twins talking through the ceiling, Lola asked her something about me and Lana tried to skip the question. The father gripped it on what remained of his chair as he sulked forward onto the table. I know taking her pets away was supposed to be punishing enough, but I just didn't think this would happen. Oh, honey, Rita patted his back. I'm sure Lana doesn't entirely blame you. She just had that huge outburst since the time we got the bad news. But I would agree that she's still trying to get used to having her room less crowded. Yeah, Lynn Sr. leaned back up on his chair, which is why I'm looking for another reptile to give her. She still has Hops and Izzy, I think that's her name was. We both know that she's always been interested in bigger animals. I spent 2 days and 8 mugs of coffee browsing the pet sites for anything that would be suitable for Lana's age. With these lizards got pretty good ratings from what I found. He clicked on one, which happened to be a 2-striped water monitor. Rita let her eyes scan the text as soon as widened about the facts that were listed, as well as the underlying uncertainty about picking such species. It looks friendly, the mother smiled nervously, but I'm not sure if it's a good idea for Lana to have a giant reptile like that again, especially at her age. She's always had bigger pets, dear. I don't know where or how she got them, but they were there. Come to think of it, Lynn scratched a bald spot on his head. I don't recall ever her telling us about how the pets she kept bringing in the house. Rita gave a dull look. I'm pretty sure that's because we did tell her to put it back outside, and she tapped on the screen. This one says it will require a hefty amount of water, which is rather iffy when it comes to the bills. Lynn Sr. hummed hesitantly. This is a baby, though, so it shouldn't need a whole lot of pool or something, and if it does, the kids have an inflatable one in the garage. If push comes to shove, I'll look for another one. But I really think Lana's gonna love this one. Besides, she usually goes to ponds around the park, so it will be good for the both of them. Rita folded her arms, drumming her fingers against her shoulders, still apprehensive about Lana owning another large animal. The monarch knew that there was a mutual feeling between herself and her husband that only would be a matter of time before the young mechanic winds up bringing another, potentially dangerous animal in the house. It was still beyond anyone on how she shouldn't have kept them as pets, let alone within a few feet of a 6-year-old. Heaven God forbid if any of them decide to have the kids for a snack. That was something Rita greatly concerned about when looking for the species of reptile on the screen. However, monitor lizards are quite popular and have proven to be good pets if cared for. Something Rita was certain Lana would be able to handle. Although the listing did note that there was a possibility these guys were biting their owners. They aren't usually aggressive and would normally do if threatened or were in proper care. Knowing how Lana does her homework, this shouldn't be an issue. There was a aforementioned fact of Lana's constant mud diving and hanging around ponds. Well, if it stops her from bringing any more animals in the house, a smile formed on her lips, I say go for it. Plus, since it's a baby, it shouldn't get too big until Lana's older. Thanks for the advice, sweetie. Lynn kissed his wife on the cheek. I'll send an order for it right now. The twins' birthday's in a couple weeks, too, so it'll make a good present for her. Rita chuckled. You do that. I gotta head to the store. She done kissed the top of her husband's nose before walking out of the dining room. No sooner did Rita shut the door behind her did Luan come shuffling down the stairs, despair clearly written on her face. This didn't go unnoticed by her father. You okay, Luan? The comedian didn't answer. disappearing into the kitchen and returning seconds later with a freshly unwrapped popsicle in her hand. Lindsay was about to question her again, but realized she probably wasn't in the mood to talk. Given a light sigh, he resumed putting the order for Lana's new pet on. "I'm so dead," Luan groaned before taking a bite of the popsicle in her hand. She flopped hazily on the couch with her emo sister still occupying the armchair as she was reading. It should note that Lucy's bangs had grown back to their usual length, but she still kept her eyes visible through the use of black hairband on top of her head. She didn't have to always keep their eyes visible, but you could say that she eventually grown used to it. Plus, while she wouldn't admit it, it was still hard to read with her hair covering your vision. It had been roughly 20 minutes since Lynn divulged the news to the rest of the family before going out for another run. While it was good that Lynn managed to get to Lincoln on specific matters, now the siblings had to worry about him going to a rage if Lynn's subtle hint at him, looking as pissed as Lola on a mediocre day, wasn't any indication. Not that even the taste of frozen grape juice was enough to calm her nerves. Lucy glanced up from her reading, studying the comedic sister's facial expressions and skin. The brunette's chest had heaved up and down for a few seconds as she drew in a heavy breath, an exasperated sigh leaving from her forlorn as she took another bite of the frozen treat. "You look like the undead, however. I have not checked yet for a pulse." "I might as well be, because I know for a fact that Lincoln is going to blow up on me harder than the Manhattan Project, and Lynn had managed to talk to him and to me next." "It would be understandable, though," Lucy stated in her usual tone, ignoring the glare Luan was throwing her away. "Sometimes fear will lead to anger. I'm almost a bit surprised Lincoln hadn't done it sooner." "And how would you know that?" Luan shifted her position, placing one leg over the other. "Remember how Lincoln was feeling before?" Lucy paused, piercing her lips ever so slightly. "It has been over a month since that shattered Sunday when he called it now, and while the other siblings may have trouble recalling the beatdown, it still sickened the emo, just merely mentioning it. Sigh, that happened. He was on the verge of unleashing it with the frustration at us, but he stopped it short when he noticed those hateful glares that pierced his soul." Luan raised a brow, not quite understanding her sister's point. The emo glanced up back from her book after not getting a response back. "What I'm saying is, his anger quite literally beaten down, shackled within his mind until the chains of fear finally weakened enough to allow him to anger to resurface. And Lynn told him everything he needed to know about our failed system. That is what's likely fueling the inner demon." Lucy then returned her attention to the book, or should I say demons. She dabbled her thumb with her tongue before flipping a page. "Now he has two emotions vividly in control instead of one." Luan then looked rather dumbfounded, her creepy sister slowly fishing what remained of the popsicle. What once her mystic loving sister's words finally sunk in. The comedian couldn't help but feel like she was essentially screwed no matter what you sliced it. "Do you have any still planned funerals?" "It has been a while since I do, despite not having much more of my equipment in hand." Lucy poked her eyes up from the literature. "Why?" "Because now I feel like I'm walking into a tightrope into a deep chasm, and I'm gonna fall real soon." The comedian responded as she sulked in her seat, allowing the wooden stick in her hands to fall to the carpet. The 8-year-old set back the book on her lap. "Normally I would be envious of your feelings, but right now I can't help but feel glad that I'm not next." Luan then gave a squint at her eyes at the little emo. "Thanks for the encouragement." The teen refocused on her with her TV scowl etched on her face. So, with the few options, Luan feared the most she would just have to take what's coming, especially due to her actions on a certain holiday looming over her head. Speaking of pranks, it has been a while since she did anything related to funny business. Because of her success, many parents were stunned as to why Luan suddenly decided to cancel bookings for the rest of the month. It goes without saying that Luan had a dedicated base, but she continued to get calls from parents who planned on having an at-home party, asking if she would resume her business, Regrettably, the comedian had to let them all down with the same message. I don't know. Won't be anytime soon, though. I'm sorry. Her heart sank further and further every time she had to skip on that opportunity to bring children happiness to the circumstances, given that it was a hypocritical that Luan could such bring other kids form of enjoyment, while she only served to bring terror towards the siblings. That, coupled with the issues that she regards for her brother, it would have hindered her performances if she wouldn't be in the right position or state of mind anyway. Man, did she wish Mr. Coconuts was there. However, knowing her siblings get angry when her rage seems to dissipate within a few hours, the comedian furrowed her brows as she thought about how Lincoln acts whenever he's upset. As evidenced by their attitudes, Lincoln was more or less like Lucy, as cliches as it sounds. Sure, it was when he's really upset or wanted something. He completed with his siblings over the last slice of pizza, or the last time everyone fought over who should get a treat at the store. Other times he preferred just to be by himself, until he was no longer angry about whatever drew his ire. Seems ironic as what remained to do in the protocol was in the first place. But unlike them, Lincoln didn't purposely interfere with someone's activities by hogging the vitally important item in the kitchen. He also didn't like taking anyone else's belongings in order to fortify his room. Sensing the situation to be a lengthy version of her deal, after April Fool's Day, the clogs in her brain turned as Luan started to formulate a plan to defuse the situation. The teen's eyes lit up and one particular thought came to her. Maybe I can appeal to his good side. Lucy gave a side glance to her sister. His what? Luan bolted up from her seat and speed-walked to the stairs. Can't talk right now. I gotta write this down before I lose it. Lucy had a brow raised again as she watched her sister march up to the second floor, turning to the reader. I am just as confused as you are. And before you ask, Lincoln isn't the only one who knows who's being watched. She buried her head back into the book to hide her smile forming on her lips. As creepy as it is. So, why are we running again? Ronaldo wheezed as she struggled to keep in pace with the brunette in front of her. It helps keeps me think better. Get more blood pump into the brain, you know? And right now, I could really use a good distraction, Lynn replied, easily keeping her breath steady. Ronaldo couldn't help but scowl as it was forming on her face. Here she was sweating like crazy. Her heart was about to pump out of her chest and with her lungs begging for her to stop moving. And Lynn looked as if she barely ran at all. But what does that have to do with self-defense? You gotta be quick if you don't want to get hit. And after seeing how tired you have from throwing your 7 hard punches, you really gotta work that. I mean, Lynn turned around, jogging back towards her as she kept lead. I get it, you want to end the fight as quick as possible, but if your opponent doesn't go down before you tire yourself out, you better hope you can at least run. The Hispanic girl squinted her eyes. Show off, she muttered to herself, before drawing back more air into her starving lungs. Can we at least slow down for a sec? We've been running for 15 minutes, she panted desperately. The younger tomboy soon became focused on what was ahead of Lynn. Aw, come on, where's your spirit? Lynn joked, putting her hands behind her back of her head. It's just another mile and well, ugh. The athlete and her broad boast cut short, upon backing right strap into a stop sign. The sudden halt of her momentum forced the rebound off support and nearly fall face first into the concrete. Lynn barely managed to put her hands out in time, grunts escaping from her as she felt her skin tearing hard on the ground. Wiping the head back, she saw the sign shaking on its post, with the octagon flashing bold letters as the sun was mocking her. Ronnie Ann would have laughed her butt off if she wasn't short out of breath. Placing her hands to her knees and sucked in more air, the Latina managed to muster a chortle once she had felt that she couldn't pass out. You alright? Don't say it, Lynn growled as she stood up, turning her palms over to check the damage. Jagged red lines marked her hands, but they were no signs of bleeding. This is gonna hurt later. Maybe you should stop showboating next time, Ronaldo chuckled, after making more heavy breaths. Lynn huffed, cracking the smirk at the 11-year-old. Says the one who can't keep it. The Latina whipped her up at the athlete, her forehead showing a tint of anger. Do I look like a track star to you? Lynn studied the former bully with a quizzical stare. Ronaldo was dressed in her sneakers, shorts, and normally wears it for PE, and the black tank top at Lynn's suggestion, a purple headband to capture the sweat that was no doubt pouring from her forehead. In comparison, the athlete was her usual tracksuit with the white and red band strapped onto her head. The Jacques pierced her lips, tapping her chin as she formulated an answer. If you put on a different shirt, you probably would. Ha ha ha, Ronaldo laughed dryly. She then stood up straight and placed her hands on her hips. Her breathing was still a little bit ragged even more. So Lincoln's mad now, huh? I guess, Lynn shrugged, leaning as there was a sign that she just crashed into. Don't get me wrong, I don't want to piss him off, but after everything I told him about our protocol and how we tried keeping him out of it, we were also still dragging him into it. Even I would be tickled at that level of stupidity. Ronaldo pierced her lips. Well, better that he's mad than afraid, I guess. At least angry people can simmer down after a while. I know that helps me a lot. I didn't say that he wasn't still afraid of us, though. No one knows Lincoln will act if there's more than one sister in the same room he's in. Aside from Lily, he'd likely go on from being mad, getting out of Dodge, before have any of us having the chance to talk. So if Lily's the only person he doesn't get scared of, have you ever tried bringing her with you? Ronaldo gestured, taking a moment to vent the air into their forehead, as she expected. The underside of the headband was very damp. Lynn then tapped her foot on the ground. No, 'cause mainly it might feel that we're just using her to get to Lincoln close, but she hasn't seen Lincoln in a long time. It probably since he got out of the hospital and moved in with the McBrides, unless Mom's been taking her to visit him without us knowing. One of her eyes narrowed a bit. Sometimes when Lily would cry, she would ask for Lincoln, and we can't do much about it since he's only a few blocks away. Ronaldo cringed a bit, soon deciding on it to remove her headband entirely. I can imagine all the screaming must be unbearable to sleep. You have no idea. Lynn folded her arms as she glanced outside. Speaking of which, Luan is supposedly next in line. That reminds me of something. What? Do you remember what happened last April Fool's Day? Yeah. Ronaldo raised a brow, shifting her position a bit. Luan invited me over, but apparently it was a trap to get Lincoln out of his room. He set off all the pranks in the house, and somehow he expected me to end it by pieing Lamo in the face. Her brows knitted together as she crossed her arms. Sorry, sweetheart, but Ronnie Ann doesn't play that way. Plus, her glare softened a bit, with a tint of red forming her cheeks, averting her gaze to the sky. It was sweet of him to do that for me. That's my point. Lincoln should have just called to tell you that it was a trap and you don't come over. That way he could have just stayed in his room with us and escaped that crappy remake of Saw or whatever. Ronaldo gave a light nod. Right. I asked him to do that while I was drawing him some new eyebrows, and you won't believe what he told me. Lynn simply raised a brow. He said in his own words, if you get nailed by Luan's pranks, I thought you pulverized me, and I told you to come another day. That would lead to the same thing. Ronaldo sighed a little, and newfound frustration settled in her gut. First off, that wouldn't make any sense, because Luan invited me over. I know all the rules about April Fools, and if I got nailed with the prank set up by Lincoln, I wouldn't exactly be mad about it. She gripped the headband tightly with one hand and let the exercise moisture drain from it. Annoyed, yes. Mad, sure. But I wouldn't beat him over it. And if he wasn't in a good time, I believe him and just come over tomorrow. So I flicked him the head for being an idiot, told him that I wouldn't beat up over something that was dumb. Folding her arms, if anything, I would have even with half the stuff that went through, like getting my hair shaved off. That would have been brutalized Luan above all else. Same here, sister, but I gotta ask, why in the world would Lincoln think you would do that to him? I mean, you're rough around the edges, but you aren't a monster. Lynn squinted her eyes at the younger girl, leaning forward slightly. Unless I'm wrong. Ronaldo detected the subtle threat easily. given her pupils had shrunk a bit, as she flinched a little at Lynn's words. No. It's not like that. I mean, she held her tongue out from the words carefully. I've been pulling pranks on Lincoln so no one would know we're together. The tomboy then saw the frown on Lynn's face grew. But he's okay with it. I haven't hit him or anything, aside from just a playful dab to the arm, and most of the pranks I've pulled are harmless. Most? Lynn interjected. Ronaldo gently rubbed her arm. A couple of times I did tie his laces together, and at one point he almost fell down the stairs. Now it was Lynn's turn to have the bite of her tongue as the young tomboy continued. Look, I get it. I know my history what probably made Lincoln and think I beat him up over a game prank, but the Latina's face became somber with her tone. It still hurt to hear him say that. It's not like I tried to hurt him on purpose or anything, and the only legit time I hit him was the first time he kissed me. He unfurled her headband and situated back in her head, shivering a little as damp cloth touched her skin. Lincoln doesn't know about it yet, but it's just really hurts knowing that he thinks that I'd be that shallow. Lynn pierced her lips a little. Did you try to talk with him about it? No. Ronaldo put her hands in her pockets. I'm afraid he just might say something stupid or he'll take it the wrong way. I don't see how that's a problem if you're just telling the truth. I'm just the girl who grabbed his attention by bullying him. Do you really think I have that time easy expressing stuff like that? Lynn gave a shrug. Well, you got this far with him. I don't know what you guys are doing, but it's working that you're still together. But as someone who's had issues trying to get Lincoln to realize I'm not here just to bully him, I lay out like this. You ought to tell him that he doesn't think of you as someone who's easily triggered. The Jacques stifled a little giggle. That's Lola's job. I guess, the Latina dug her fervor into her pocket and pulled out her phone. It was almost too regrettably. So, Lynn pushed herself off the sign. Ready to head back? Ronaldo huffed a little light smirk, working its way out. Just don't run into any more stop signs. With the weight of so many thoughts going at his brain, Lincoln eventually decided that it was just better to lie down somewhere to rest his noggin. Normally he wouldn't skip watching Ace Savvy if he could help it. As much as he tried to short out his feelings, there was just an air of confusion and frustration that only served to distract him from the entertainment, just to give him a headache. He was bordering on a migraine. Lying on his side, the boy made a note not to put too much pressure on his left arm. It still was a bit sensitive, especially around his elbow and joint where the ulnar nerve. Clyde gave him one of those old ice packs, where you just fill up the bag of ice versus more modern types, which is super cool gel pack. Elevated with some kind of pain, but Lincoln considered taking some painkillers in case if it got worse. Forget it. He was too lazy and tired to get out of bed anyway. As Lincoln then put his brain to sleep, a brief thought falling into another dream floated around at that moment. He hadn't woken up from another mirror life situation over since the previous one that occurred earlier that week. And aside from the sleepless nights, the Louds dealt with due to the anxiety of the joint session with Lynn, and Lincoln just felt his Ace Savvy dreams were pretty much over with. He felt a little disheartened as the thought Lynn didn't survive the building collapse. Try as she might, the Jacques didn't even attempt to save him, when all was pretty much lost. Then again, it'd be good to best to run by himself if Lynn didn't beat the utter shit out of him. Twisting his body as he was lying flat on his back, the boy moved the ice pack to his forehead before lying still. His eyes flickered open for a few seconds, only to close again, as the Loud effectively passed out. Aside from the ticking of the clock on the nightstand, silence was the only thing that enveloped Lincoln. To his pressure, his mind started to feel more empty the longer he slept, the dull pains in his head increasingly decreasing as he slipped further and further from reality. However, as Lincoln continued on through his slumber, a dull sound started to ring in his ears. Weird. He hadn't heard that ever since he was in the hospital, which thankfully he was discharged from almost a month ago. The boy's eyelids tightened a bit before they slowly creaked open. His vision was blurry as random shapes began to take form. His vision sharpened as The boy began to feel a ticklish sensation in his nose, allowing to feel in something he was plugged into it. The sensation soon became too much to bear. Before Lincoln let out a sneeze, soon coughing, his chest gave a piercing achings for reasons he couldn't understand. "Lincoln!" a quiet voice called out, to which much was followed by a quick shuffling. The boy breathed deep. His eyes shot open, or in his case eye. He could see the sense the right was fused open. The first thing Lincoln saw was a certain tomboy looking over him. Worry very much was clear on his face. "Ronnie Ann?" he spoke, his voice hoarse and weak. Ronaldo immediately wrapped her arms around him, being careful not to cause him any pain. I thought you were going to end up like my brother." Taken aback by the sudden contact, Lincoln darted his eyes around the room. In spite of Ronaldo's hair covering half of his limited vision, he made it clear out of the TV some medical equipment buttons aside from his bed, and if leaned up enough, he barely noticed a heart pulse monitor just beside Ronnie Ann. The fact that he felt a slight draft from below as well as his clothing, being the extremely light that told him he was probably wearing a hospital gown. "What?" He spoke hesitantly. Nervousness then crept up his spine. "What's going on?"